A little while ago I posted a video about looking after quite an old Hyundai i30 diesel. That was a Mark 1 from 2011. Today I'm talking about my Mark 2 i30 diesel. So I bought this in September 2016. It was 10 months old and done just under 3,000 miles, and since then I've put another 117,000 miles on it. This is the facelifted version. That's the shape of the grille that tells you it's the facelift. And the thing to note is that the diesel on the facelifted model is Euro 6, which means it's ULEZ compliant. And all the time I've owned this car, I haven't paid a penny in road tax. From this year, I'm going to have to pay £20 a year. I think it's a diabolical liberty, but I guess they have to raise the money from somewhere. So let's now talk about the sort of things I've had to do to this car to keep it running, and we'll start off at the tailgate. On the tailgate, I've had to replace the rear wiper blade 3 times. I always use Bosch blades front and rear, so I've spent £22.47 on rear wiper blades. The last one I replaced in June 2022, and it cost me £6.32. Another thing I had to do was to replace this switch, because the rubber, it's quite a common problem, the rubber starts to break up and fall away. So that cost me £11.11p in June of last year, June 2024. I fitted a tow bar myself in July 2020. It's a detachable tow bar. That cost me £180, including the electric kit for a single socket. Lights, I've probably had to replace maybe 1 or 2 bulbs in all that time. Quite easy to do. In fact, all the bulbs on the car, front, rear and inside, probably £20 would cover the cost of replacing all those. Rear suspension, I replaced the rear anti-roll drop links in July 2021. They cost me £22.62, and they were Delphi parts. Rear brakes, so I replaced the rear pads in January 2020. It's about 56,000 miles, and I bought some genuine Hyundai pads for £42. I replaced the rear discs in April 2021 at 72,000 miles. They were Bendix, £59.52. When I replaced them, I noticed the dust seal on this caliper had a split in it, so I had to spend £9.49 on a repair kit. I replaced the pads again in October 2023 at 104,000 miles. They were Pagid pads and they cost me £23.74. And this caliper, I replaced that last year, April 2024, at 110,000 miles. That was a third-party caliper, £38.94. And it was because the handbrake mechanism started to seize up. It's quite a common problem on these calipers, that the shaft within the caliper starts to corrode and it starts to get quite stiff, and you notice that the handbrake starts to become quite loose and just doesn't hold the car. So, but again, a pretty easy DIY fix. Not much to say about the inside of the car. I bought a set of floor mats when I first got the car. They cost me £19.95, and then In October 2024 I replaced just the driver's mat. That cost me £8.32. One of these map reading lights failed, and although it's just a normal festoon bulb, it's a weird wattage. It was an 8-watt bulb, which is hard to get, so I just replaced both of them with LED bulbs. That was in May 2024. They cost me £3.89. I have 2 working keys. I replaced this little pad that goes over the actual buttons because it was just starting to split, and that cost me £3.35. And I think on each of the pads I've replaced the battery once. This little bit here, you just have to open it up, it just flips open. It's just a standard CR203 button cell. I mean, they're only a couple of pounds each. Again, pretty easy to do. And the tyres, I replaced all 4 tyres in January 2019 with Michelin Cross Climates. That was around 39,000 miles. And all 4 tyres cost me £253.84. And then I replaced them again in November 2021 at around 82,000 miles with Cross Climate 2s. They cost me £263.10. And in addition to the tyres, I spent £50 in December 2021 having the front and rear wheel alignment done, and I've spent £28 repairing 2 punctures. Okay, let's move on to the front brakes. I replaced the front brake pads in September 2020 at about 65,500 miles. Pagid pads cost me £37.19, and I replaced the front discs in July 2021 at 76,000 miles. They were Delphi discs and they were £80. But I do look around for, I usually measure my brake discs with my micrometer, so I know how much wear they've had, roughly when they're going to be replaced, and I look around for trying to get parts at a good price. So for example, there's another set of front disc pads I bought, genuine Hyundai pads. I got those for £15. And with the original Hyundai pads, you get these little shims too. As with most third-party brake pads, you don't get those, so if you want to replace them, you have to buy those as an accessory. So under the bonnet, well, first thing, I've replaced the front wiper blades twice. I've spent a total of £35.86 on those. The last set I replaced in May 2022 at 88,000 miles, and I paid £18.04 for them. While the car was under warranty, I had it dealer serviced. So I had 5 dealer services altogether. To October 2017, 18,000 miles, that cost £358.55. December 2018, 38,000 miles, that was £379.62. February 2020 at 58,000 miles, £495.07. That was an expensive service because they replaced the coolant and the gearbox oil. August 2021, after it was out of warranty, I had what they called an essentials full service at 78,000 miles. That was £229, and then on the dealer's advice in January 2023 I had their £99 essential service. That was £99 at 98,000 miles, but they didn't do as much as the previous service. So if you add those all together, I've spent a total of £1,561.24 on those dealer services. And for those services, that's the only time the car's been into the dealers. No work's been required other than the service work. No repairs, no recalls, and no warranty work. And it was quite handy because I needed the car for work, so they always gave me a free courtesy car so I could drop the car off in the morning, go into work, come back in the evening and pick my own car up. So the 8 services I've done myself, I've done 6 oil changes altogether. That's an intermediate oil service between the dealer services, and then 2 more services since I stopped having it dealer serviced. So they'll add up to £151.71. And the last 2 oil services I've done have worked out to be £22.74 each. I started off using the Shell Helix Professional AG oil, but it just became ridiculously expensive, which means that one of these 20-litre tubs went from costing about £69 to about £120. So I changed to moving this Manol Energy Premium 5W30. So it's a full synthetic C3 oil, exactly as the car specification asks for. Oil filters, I always use this Marley filter. The first oil change I ever did, I actually went to the dealer to buy the proper Hyundai filter, but I opened the box and that's what was inside, so I've used those ever since. The oil filter is quite easy to replace, it just sits underneath this cover. So all you need is a 27mm socket and preferably a torque wrench so that you don't over tighten that cap. Okay, what have I done other than that? Okay, air filter, I've changed that twice at 98 and 118,000 miles. Total cost of those was £24.66. I've always used Hengst filters, it's dead easy to change, there's just a couple of spring clips and the cover comes off and it's really a 2-minute job to change. So the last time I used changed the air filter in January this year, it cost me £10.43. At the same time I changed the pollen filter, which is accessible inside the cabin behind the glove box. So I've spent a total of £18.17 on pollen filters. The first time I used a Marley filter, which was £11.99, and then the last one I changed in January this year. I used a Valio filter, which was £6.18. I've changed the fuel filter once, and it actually sits behind here, which is quite daunting, but having done it, it's quite an easy job. You just have to take the battery out, unplug the engine management unit, the ECU, take that out, and then the fuel filter is quite accessible. And this is the fuel filter. So as you can see, you've got the Hyundai and Kia part number, but you've also got the Marley part number, so that's what I bought, the Marley filter. So yeah, although it looks a bit daunting being tucked all the way behind, it's actually quite easy once you've done it. Fuel filter, what else did I do? Oh, I changed the gearbox oil to 118,000 miles, and I bought a bottle of this Manol gear oil. It's the 75W85 GL4, exactly what the specification should be. That's 4 litres, and half of that is enough for one oil change, so that cost me £8.77. and it's quite an easy job. You just have to get the car on level ground, jack it up, take the front wheel off, lower it down to make it level again, and inside the wheel arch there's a little plastic cover that you take away, and then if you have a socket set with a long extension you can get to the drain and fill plugs on the gearbox. And one thing I found that made it easier is I bought a big plastic syringe, so I would use that to suck the oil out of the bottle and then squirt it into the gearbox, so it was quite a good way of doing it. So again, quite an easy job. Brake fluid replacement, I've replaced that once. There's the hydraulic reservoir. So 1 litre of .4 fluid, that cost me £7.29, and I had the air conditioning regassed in July 2021. That cost me £132 because it uses the expensive fluid, the R1234YF. Alright, so if I just move on to things that have actually stopped working and have needed repairs. So in July 2022, at around 90,000 miles, I had to replace the starter motor, just down there, not too hard. So I bought a new third-party motor. That cost me £129.95. Now the old motor didn't stop working completely, it just every now and again it just wouldn't start, and I took the old motor apart and found there was a plastic piece inside that had broken, so really nothing I could do to fix that. I've replaced the battery twice. So the first time I replaced it in January 2019 at 38,500 miles. That was £120, and then I replaced it again in November 2024 at 116,000 miles, and that cost me £116.63. They're not cheap because this car has automatic start-stop, so you need a AGM battery. But the batteries they were just getting tired. They never actually didn't start the car, but I could tell that they were just struggling a bit more than normal. And also the auto stop-start stopped working, which is a sign the battery's starting to go. So fit the new battery and it just started working again straight away. And there's nothing to do when you change the battery apart from just reset the clock in the car and the radio presets. And then the final thing, which is a bit hard to show, but it's buried away under here, and it's the hydraulic hose that connects to the clutch. It uses a concentric clutch, a slave cylinder, so there's a little spigot that comes out of the bell housing, and the hydraulic hose just pushes onto it, and there's a little spring clip that holds it on. And what I found in July 2021, that the hydraulic fluid level was starting to drop, and if I shone a torch down through the engine bay I could see a little puddle of hydraulic fluid on the plastic tray that sits under the engine, and it was leaking from the connection between the hydraulic hose and the slave cylinder. And what I found was the little spring clip, part of it had broken off and it wasn't holding the hose on very tight anymore, so it was allowing it to leak. So I did inquire, but the Hyundai wouldn't supply the spring clip on its own. You could only buy the entire hose assembly, which was over £100. So what I did was I replaced a sealing O-ring from a kit I already had, and I just strapped the hose on with cable ties, and that seemed to fix it. So then I just forgot about it. But then in September 2023 I found that the cable ties had broken. It actually stopped the clutch working altogether, and that's the one and only time this car has ever broken down. Fortunately I was only about 400 metres from home, so I got a friend to come round and just tow me back home. So this time I thought I'll make a permanent repair. I asked again about getting hold of the clutch hose, but I still didn't want to pay that price, so I had a look around and I found that Vauxhall did a spring clip that looked virtually identical, so I went to the local dealers. I got them to order some, so I bought two for about £5, and it was almost identical to the original clip. So I just fitted another O-ring, pushed the hose back on, put the new clip in, bled the air out, and it's been fine ever since, with no sign of leaking at all. So if you add up what I've spent on my own repairs, servicing tyres, that comes to £1,940.72. And if you add that to what I spend on dealer services, the grand total is £3,501. That's over a period of 8 years, 9 months and 117,000 miles. So it works out to about 3 pence a mile. But to offset that, in the time that I used the car for business, I actually received £12,699 tax-free to cover my mileage expenses, because it was my own personal car, so I could claim 45 pence a mile. And after deducting the fuel I spent for those business miles of £3,312, that left a pot of about £9,387 to cover my other running and ownership costs. So that £3,500 spent on repairs and servicing and tyres is just a small part of that nearly £9,400 towards running the car. So obviously I haven't included things like the cost of MOTs and my insurance costs, but then they would be the same pretty much for whatever car I had. So that pretty much wraps it up. I hope you found that reasonably useful. Thank you.